thanking everyone for coming. I wanted to introduce the leadership that's at the table here to bring their message all the way from Northern Ontario. Let me start simply by providing some context and introductions. To my left is Chief Jim Leonard, Chief of Rainy River First Nations. To his left is Ogidjita Grand Chief Francis Kavanaugh, Grand Chief for Treaty 3. And to Ogidjita's left is Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler, Grand Chief of Anishinaabe, Aski Nation. Could we get that door closed, please? Thanks. Together, NAN and Treaty 3 territory occupy most of Northern Ontario. Between NAN and Treaty 3 communities, we are looking at 77 First Nation communities in the remote north of Ontario. The context for being here today is that most recently, and very sadly, on May 7th, 2017, the body of 17-year-old Tammy Kiash was found in the Nibing McIntyre floodway. She was from North Caribou Lake First Nation and living in Thunder Bay. She was reported missing on May 6th. On May 18th, 2017, not even 2 weeks ago, the body of 14-year-old Josiah Begg was found in the McIntyre River. He comes from Kichi-Nimakusa-Binanuwag, known as KI. He went missing on May 6, 2017. These deaths at the rivers follow the death of Stacey DeBungy. He was found on October 19, 2015. 3 hours after his discovery, the Thunder Bay Police Service had already published a press release, despite no post-mortem yet, that an initial investigation indicated a non-suspicious death, no foul play. These 3 latest river deaths are why these leaders are here. Chief Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Faulkner. Today we're here to demand some action immediately. The Thunder Bay Police, I don't think it's an option. And some of the reasons are that Julian mentioned is that on October 19th, Stacey DeBungy was found. And at the funeral, his family approached our council and asked for help. And the more we looked into it, the more concerned we began. We immediately sought legal advice, and I contacted several lawyers in Thunder Bay. For whatever reason, the legal profession in Thunder Bay chose not to get involved. So hence, we were able to secure Mr. Faulkner. Throughout this process, we've encountered roadblock after roadblock, barrier after barrier. And which part of the reason brings us here today, along with the 2 recent deaths of Tammy and Josiah. We can't continue with this. We have to do something today, and that's why we're here. It's our view that the Thunder Bay Police cannot fix this. They've shown that they're not able to come to any conclusion other than the deaths are non-suspicious and non-criminal, which doesn't hold any water with us. Last summer, we contacted the Thunder Bay Police on 3 occasions and asked that the file be transferred to another police force. It took many, many emails, many, many phone calls till we finally got a response. And at the time, the Chief of Police indicated that he wasn't prepared to transfer the case, even after speaking to the commissioner of the OPP, who indicated because there was an ongoing OIRPD review that he wouldn't get involved if there was a review going on. We subsequently got a letter in writing from Jerry McNeely from the OIRPD, who indicated that he didn't see any problem or any reason the investigation could continue even with the file being transferred. In accordance, we also attempted to contact the Police Services Board in Thunder Bay on a number of occasions. And we were met with those same barriers and stonewalling. They indicated that there was a review going on and they couldn't meet with us. Last week, the Police Services Board finally made a statement, and that statement basically stated that they supported the Thunder Bay Police 100%, even without the results of the investigation. They're already predetermining that the police did everything they could, I guess, but that goes to show that the Police Services Board has already taken a position on it, even without all the information coming in. So we feel that they're also not able to perform their task. And my understanding is that their oversight for the police and their job is to ensure that policing is conducted fairly, thoroughly, for everyone. And it's obvious it's not happening with the Debungy case and also with the two recent deaths, to Tammy and Josiah. I'll pass it on to Francis.
Good morning. I joined Chief Leonard in this regard because he's one of my communities that I represent in Treaty 3, and of course supporting Nan as well. But my reasoning to be here as well is it's incomprehensible to believe, what I'm hearing, what I'm reading in the media in Thunder Bay. That each time someone is pulled out of the water, and it's Aboriginal young people, and the same conclusion always comes right out. It's no foul play, the end of investigation. So that's why I'm here today, and specifically with the calling in of the RCMP. The RCMP should be called in because the OPP lacks credibility. Rainy River First Nations and the Debungy family sent 3 letters between July and September 2016 seeking to have the investigation transferred to another police service. Chief Levesque responded on September the 9th, 2016, refusing to transfer the investigation. Chief Levesque noted that he had met in person with Commissioner Hawks of the OPP regarding the investigation of Mr. Debungy's death, and Commissioner Hawks clearly expressed that he would not entertain such a request during the course of an outstanding OIPRD investigation. Since the OIPRD is currently investigating the deaths of Josiah Begg, Tammy Kiash, as well as Mr. Debungy, the OPP must be ruled out as the possible investigative body consisting with the reasoning behind the Commissioner's prior refusal. Additionally, the OPP lacks credibility with NAN and Treaty 3 communities. For example, in Solocaut, the OPP is noted to have issues over policing, racial profiling that were aggravated with respect to the recent Little Bands hockey tournament. Such incidents have compounded the Indigenous loss of confidence generated by the OPP's refusal to investigate regarding Debungy. And I also might add that in my own territory, in town of Kenora, we have similar circumstances. We've lost 2 young girls in the last year and a half. And again, the same conclusion was made when they were discovered in the water. They said no foul play. Death was consistent with drowning. Same thing. As a police force for Canada, but currently free of any involvement in Northern Ontario, the OPP is the best placed investigative agency to complete these investigations and provide the RCMP, I'm sorry, I'll reread that. The police force for Canada, but currently free of any involvement in Northern Ontario. The RCMP is the best placed investigative agency to complete these investigations and provide a credible report. There is both precedent and legal authority to bring the RCMP where a local police service is unable or unwilling to provide unbiased services itself. Previous examples include the RCMP laying fraud and money laundering charges against Carl Wash and other senior executives of the Ontario Provincial Police Association in 2016. Then Chief Fantino of the Toronto Police Service calling the RCMP to investigate corruption charges against his officers in 2001. The Chief of Saskatchewan Police called in RCMP to investigate satellite tours in Saskatchewan in 2000. Concludes my comments. Thank you.
Miigwech. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this press conference this morning. I just want to start by acknowledging that we are in the territory of Mississaugas of New Credit, so I acknowledge Chief Laforme, his council, and the citizens of his community. On Monday of this week, the three of us, Chief Leonard, Ogajda, Kavanaugh, and myself, wrote a letter. Actually, we wrote 2 letters. One was to the Ontario Provincial or Ontario Civilian Police Commission, OCPC, asking them to immediately appoint an administrator to oversee the police services in Thunder Bay. And the reason why we made that request is to, as was expressed by Chief Leonard and the Wichita Kavanaugh about the concerns that we have with the Thunder Bay Police Service. There's been no leadership at all, in our view, from this Police Services Board over these many years, over the many tragic events that and the losses our communities have suffered. They've been silent. You know, when there was an inquest last year to examine the 7 student deaths in Thunder Bay, 5 of them were found in the river. Not one of them ever came to any of those proceedings. And they've been silent on these recent deaths, except a few days ago when the Vice President, Brian McKinnon, finally spoke in public, not to support what we've been saying and what we've been expressing, our concerns, but rather to rebuke what we've been saying. You know, his comments that he expressed on behalf of the board were offensive to the families that have lost loved ones in Thunder Bay. They were very disrespectful. And he could not have been more clear on where they stand on these issues. The fact that he sat next to the president of the union, the police union, spoke volumes for our communities. And it just reinforced what we've been saying all along, that they do not represent, you know, even though Thunder Bay has a growing Indigenous population, we're probably over 20% now, that they, rather than acknowledging what's been happening in our communities, they continue to deny that there are issues in Thunder Bay that need to be resolved, that they need to resolve. And I just want to read something here that under the Police Services Act, what a police services board, what their role is in terms of civilian oversight. And this was from a report that was published in over 20 years ago. It says here, the Police Services Board is responsible for providing civilian monitoring of the force and setting policies for its operation. Because of this obligation to monitor and because police investigate allegations against their own members, expectations for scrutiny by the Police Services Board as representatives of the community are high. It is imperative that police services boards understand their role and are held accountable to the public. Their function is a crucial one. Boards exist to ensure that police services provided meet community standards. The problem we have is that we never hear from the Police Services Board. We never hear from the chairperson of the board. In fact, the request that we've made, as stated by Chief Jim Leonard, you get stonewalled. I don't even know who the police chairperson is. If there was a line of people, I couldn't pick her out. And that's a real concern. And it's a bit ironic with the request, because anytime there's an issue with any of our communities, a third-party manager is called in right away to take over that operation. And the request that we're making today is along the same lines. The fact that right now the police services is so dysfunctional, they don't have a police chief. We understand that the deputy chief is away on vacation. We never hear from the chair of the police service. And when they speak out against our communities and our families. So that's why we're calling on the OCPC to step in right away, to install an administrator that all of us can have confidence in that something will be done. And that's why we're here today. Miigwech.
To update folks on the status of matters, as our leaders have pointed out, 2 letters were written, one to the OCPC, to the chair, Chair Lamoureux, and secondly, a letter to the Minister of Community Safety, Minister Lalonde. These 2 letters are available, and we're prepared to share copies of them with you. In both letters, issues around the lack of confidence in either the Thunder Bay Police Service or the OPP to investigate these deaths are detailed. In each of these letters, the issues around the board are detailed. I'm tasked with letting you know and updating you that last night, Ogidjita Kavanaugh, Grand Chief Fiddler, and Chief Leonard received notice from the Ontario Civilian Police Commission in writing by a letter of May 30th last night that they have commenced an investigation pursuant to the Police Services Act into the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. That is, the governing body of police services boards has started an investigation into the Thunder Bay Police Services Board, that they have advised in writing that the Commission has commenced the investigation and will seriously consider the question of the appointment of an administrator if the evidence justifies it. In addition to this letter, you should also know that in terms of where things sit, the OPP has been quite clear that they will not help the Indigenous people in Thunder Bay get answers because there's an OIPRD investigation. As a matter of law, I'm simply communicating to you that you should be very troubled by that kind of response. that the communities would be deprived of the benefits of an investigation into a death because they access the OIPRD is offensive and very troubling, and says something about the OPP's misunderstanding of their role. At this stage, we're prepared to entertain questions and make documents available as requested.
Have you heard from the RCMP yet? Does this, I guess the call just went out today, this morning?
We sent the letter on Monday afternoon. We haven't officially heard from anybody from the federal government.
The mechanics of it are that the Thunder Bay Police Service have to cooperate with the Minister of Community Safety, the provincial minister, in asking the RCMP to come in. So the first step is to hear from the minister and the Thunder Bay Police Service that they'll honor the request.
Okay. So this is my next question then. So have you heard from any of the ministers here at Queen's Park about what's been going on? This is what's been going on has been going on for years. Since the students' deaths, if not before. Have you heard anything at all from any of the local members of Parliament?
Yeah, we did hear from the Public Safety Provincial Minister to acknowledge that she received a letter and that they're closely monitoring the situation in Thunder Bay, and that we're hopefully schedule a follow-up meeting soon.
I just got, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, if there is an investigation, well, there is an investigation happening out of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. But what happens next? I mean, so there's an investigation. You still have the same police officers there. You still have the same leadership, with the exception of Chief Levesque, who's off right now. And you still have this board that's there. I mean, what can really be done?
Well, first of all, the powers of the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, the powers of the OCPC, include the power to disband a board, include the power to discipline a board, and put in a new board. So the answer to what can be done is that's exactly why the leadership has chosen to invoke the governing body of the boards. You raise a good question about the deaths. The verdict in respect of the 5 deaths around the rivers of the youth came out June 28th, 2016. 145 recommendations. Since June 28th, 2016, 3 more river deaths, at least. The astronomical disproportion of deaths of Indigenous people at the rivers in Thunder Bay is staggering. There's no other community in this country that is losing this many people at the rivers. So the role of the Thunder Bay Police Service is supposed to be to investigate this and actually get to the bottom of why this is happening. It isn't because they caused the deaths, it's because they're unable to do those investigations that today is happening. Because they're incompetent to do those investigations today is happening. So this is very much about what to do next. And the answer is these communities, these families need a police service that has the credibility to undertake the investigations of Stacey DeBungy, of Tammy Kiash, and of Josiah Begg.
I have the reaction of the board in Thunder Bay. This board accepts that systemic racism is a barrier to the Indigenous peoples. Systemic racism is a much broader term than just the relationship between police and Indigenous communities. A police service cannot cure systemic racism. We accept that our service has a role to play. The board and the service continue to support and participate in the ongoing OIPRD review. That includes a review of systemic racism in policing in Ontario. So could I get a reaction from you, especially from Chief Leonard, on this, please?
Like I said earlier, we were in contact with them about a year ago now, asking to sit down with them and talk about the problem. At the time, they refused, just basically stating that because there was a systemic review going on, they wouldn't get involved. And like I indicated, Mr. McNeely indicated that these discussions could move forward without complication to the review. And it was total silence up until last week when we finally were informed of the position of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. And that was to to support their officers when we're saying that their job is to support, and provide oversight to the general community, which includes ourselves. So up until last week, and I saw that that statement this morning, and my first thought was, well, why didn't they tell us this before? Why didn't they sit down with us, months ago to begin working? All of a sudden, within a day, they're doing all these things, but they haven't involved us. So obviously, they're doing it in a vacuum.
Yeah, I think just to illustrate or to confirm what we're talking about here this morning, when we wrote that letter to them on Monday, we addressed it to the chair of the board. We received a response from their lawyer a few hours later. And basically what the letter said, they were not in a position to respond to our issues because there was no management. As you know, the chief is not available, and the deputy chief is on vacation. And this is the police service that they're supposed to oversee, not get direction from in terms of how they should be responding to our issues. To us, when we saw that letter, just confirmed the problem is that they don't have the ability, or they don't want to provide oversight on our behalf to this police service.
What do you think is happening by the river?
I just wanted to respond to that stuff you just read out. I guess my immediate response is, given the situation's been ongoing for years and the similarities are the same, so why hasn't the Thunder Bay Police identify and design a process and find out why these are happening? They're all similar, and it's all young Aboriginals. So that's my question. That's my thought when I hear that. That's to me, that's a very poor excuse. Which
What do you think is happening by the rivers?
I think that's why we're here, to ask for help from the RCMP to help us find out what is happening, because obviously something's happening there. And we fully support the systemic review that's going on. But as Mr. McNeely indicated, to do a proper and thorough review, it's going to take some time. So we're looking at 9 months, maybe a year, till a report is finalized. Well, we can't wait a year, because the way things are going, there's going to be some more of our children found in the water between now and a year, unless something is done. So we're here today to ask the province to intervene and do something immediately. Because, in the short term.
I'll turn the question around. So why you're not satisfied with the foul play and no foul play outcome, like decision?
Because those determinations are made very quickly. And I'll be blunt here. It's just a case of finding another dead Indian who rolled in the water, a drunk Indian that rolled in the water. That is the feeling we get from the community in Thunder Bay, the way they're treated, the way people are saying. It's just another drunk Indian rolling into the river, so who cares? Nonchalantly. That's the attitude.
What's the impact been on the community?
It's devastating. Community members are talking about it. They're talking about things that happened to them. It's causing a lot. I talked to one of my community members who was involved in the search, and he said something's got to be done. It's a powder keg in Thunder Bay. Something bad is going to happen if we don't do something today. I'm afraid of what may happen. So we have to show the people, the city of Thunder Bay, the people of the First Nations living around there, that we're doing something. And we're asking the province to do something today. We can't wait until these investigations are done. Because tonight, or tomorrow night or the night after, something's going to happen. And it's not going to be good.
It was said before, but maybe I'd like to hear it from you, Chief. Why the RCMP would be more suitable to do that kind of job instead of the OPP?
Because the OPP have already expressed that they don't want to get involved. Chief Kavanagh related that they're having problems in Sulakot. He's having similar problems with the OPP in Kenora. So we're asking for some new blood or new faces come into the act. And we're asking that the RCMP be the ones that come in.
Can you tell us what the problems are that you're experiencing, Chief, in your territory with the OPP? I know that you've had 2 recent deaths of young Indigenous women.
Just like I said, we've lost 2 young women in the last year and a half. One went missing for about a month before they located her, but there are circumstances to suggest that she died, possibly not from drowning. You know, there was family has come forward seeking answers, and they're still not getting answers. I've written letters to the government, Ontario government, requesting inquests or more investigation conducted in those 2 areas. And there was another incident where a young lady was ended up in hospital situation, and she was released from the hospital, saying that they had no reason to keep her in there. And she subsequently went missing, and a couple days later they found her deceased. And again, right away, the decision was that there was no foul play. You know, so it's not an isolated incidents in terms of that happening in Thunder Bay. It's happening elsewhere. I cited Sulakot, Kenora. Well, there's something wrong. And the mindset needs to change. We are human beings too.
Why has it taken so long for this to get into sort of the national conscious? I think it's, as I said earlier, it's been years. As you all know, it's been so many years this has been happening in Thunder Bay. We've heard about problems in Saskatchewan, but it seems like what's been going on in Thunder Bay has just been left for so long. Why is it all of a sudden now we're starting to hear things, but still
I guess, you know, your guess is as good as mine. You know?
One of the issues that I've seen since I started assisting Rainy River First Nations and NAN is that there is a badge of credibility that the Thunder Bay Police Service hide behind with a police services board that does their bidding. There is a mayor, a former president of a police union, who is a major cheerleader for the police. And then there are Indigenous people with questions that never get answers. So the situation has been allowed to fester because of all those dynamics. It's called powerlessness. And a perfect example, when Chief Leonard wrote for the OPP to intervene, he was met with a stonewall. He wrote Minister Orazietti last October and asked Minister Orazietti to step in and get a proper investigation of the death of Stacey DeBungy. The minister didn't answer. I mean, Indigenous leaders have been raising the issues of the river deaths for years. And it is not because they have been slow to act. It's because they are not placed on the same footing or importance as the town of Windsor, the town of London, or other non-Indigenous centers. I mean, that's just the truth.
I have a question for Mr. Fiddler. Are you going to ask for any other reviews of past cases investigated by Thunder Bay Police?
I think it was Francis that said that there's other cases that we are concerned about that remain unresolved, and the requests that we have received from those families, I think, directing us to work with authorities to seek answers that they have is something that we will have to follow up on. So right now, the request that we are making today is to ensure that there's proper investigation on the three losses with Stacy DeBungy and Tammy Kiash and Josiah Begg. But there are others that we need to follow up on, and I think once we know who is going to investigate the makeup of that team, then I'm sure there'll be others, other families that will come forward and tell their story and that they want their case to be investigated as well. So we need to make sure that those are open.
I guess what I referenced on was one of my communities at Treaty 3 lost a member, a granddaughter, a daughter, a sister, some 18 years ago. She was murdered, and there's still no answers. The family is still seeking answers, and that's what I referenced the other day. So
What's her name?
I don't really want to name names at this point in time because I haven't asked the family if I can say anything in that regard. So I have to respect them. They still haven't had closure. They're still looking for that. But it's in the news. It's been on TV as well, just as recent as a few days ago.
What kind of impact does this situation have on your residents who live in Thunder Bay? Are they scared? Do they not trust the police? How do they feel?
Yeah, I was up in KI on Monday for the funeral of Josiah Begg, and just the community members expressing concern and even fear of traveling into Thunder Bay is, I think, something that is very real and something that we all need to acknowledge. And also for our youth that reside in Thunder Bay is something that we need to take very seriously, and that's why we're saying today that something needs to happen right now to ensure that their safety, that their well-being is protected, that we don't want to lose any more lives. And it's very concerning to the point where some of our communities up north are saying they don't want to come to Thunder Bay this summer. Our children are writing to us saying that they are very concerned for their safety when they come to Thunder Bay, that they refuse to come to Thunder Bay. So we're concerned, obviously, about the summer, the summer, then the fall when the students come back in September. We need to be able to demonstrate to them and to the families that something is going to be done.
I guess we have. I come from a community called Notikomegwaning in Treaty 3. We also have a concern. We have parents that we have a lot of young people in Thunder Bay that go to school there. So there is a concern right now whether to continue going there or elsewhere. I've also had a non-native friend of mine express to me that his son, non-native who lives in Thunder Bay, close by the bridge itself, has to walk across the bridge to access a convenience store. And just recently he wanted to do just that. But approaching the bridge, there was a fight going on. So he turned back, he was scared. Next morning he walked by there to go to school, and there was blood on the bridge, and there was blood on the railing. So it's not just Aboriginal kids that are scared, it's also non-natives that are scared. It's not to... Never mind now.
Thank you.
You had asked a question about explanations for the deaths, and of course that's what leadership are asking for, is a credible investigative body that can give answers. But it's important to reflect on what actually happened at the 7 Youth inquest. The pathologist, the forensic pathologist that testified, Dr. Rose, testified that in the cases of these kinds of deaths, the forensic pathologist can't tell the difference. They can't tell the difference between someone who has minor abrasions from being in an altercation or someone who's been rolled into a river. They can't tell the difference. I'll read to you from evidence. Dr. Rose, the forensic pathologist, quote, "I've already said that forensic pathology cannot distinguish based on pathology findings between drownings that occur by accident as a result of suicide or by someone else by homicide." They can't tell the difference because the body's in the water and deterioration means it's very difficult. So someone who's vulnerable by the rivers, there is no way without a competent, effective investigation of knowing what happened. And that's why it becomes essential to have the right people do the work. And what has been happening for an impermissible period of time is the wrong people have been doing the work and simply feeding anxieties. And as for the Police Services Board's comments this morning, they stand in stark contrast to what Vice Chair McKinnon said last Thursday, that there is no evidence of systemic racism in the Thunder Bay Police Service. That was his public comment, that he predicted the outcome of the OIPRD's report, completely contemptuous of the process. So when no one's looking and they aren't being reported or investigated, we hear how they really think. But now through their lawyer, we're going to hear how cooperative and compliant they're going to be as soon as the Deputy Chief of Police gives them direction. So, it is really stretching credulity to accept that the board has in any way fully cooperated or done their job. In the City of Toronto, a Police Services Board meeting, it's a public event. People make deputations and public issues are discussed publicly as a matter of transparency. I defy anyone to tell me the last time there was a public meeting of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board where deputations were entertained and transparency was the order of the day. That's not how they do business.
Okay, thank you.
So that wraps up? Good.
Thank you.
Sure, that's fine.